Germany is the biggest and most powerful core of what we call Western Europe, and it has been for a long time. Germany was the only serious competitor with the United States to replace the British Empire. Had Germany not fought and lost both world wars, we would be much more aware of what was going on in that country than we are. But those wars removed Germany from the competition. World War II removed Japan from the competition and gave us, the United States, the kind of free ride of the last 75 years of being the dominant economic powerhouse in the world. And we are now going through the decline, the precipitous decline of the American empire of the last 75 years. And that is changing everything, because after Germany was defeated twice in two world wars, and its enemy was the United States in both world wars, it took a very subordinate position, as did the other loser in World War II, Japan, subordinate to the winner, which is often what happens in big wars. And so what we are seeing is a moment cataclysmically important for global politics, although you wouldn't notice that from American media treatment. We are seeing Germany leading Europe to recognize now that they bet on the wrong horse after World War II, because the United States, which would and did protect them from their fantasy of being at risk of a Russian invasion, it protected them for 70 years. It can no longer afford to do it because its own empire is declining. And so with the Trump administration, the United States is withdrawing from being the protector of Europe and now wants to rip it off to benefit the United States. That's what the America First really means. When the United States, in its decline, has to turn on its former friends and allies, above all Europe, but equally Canada and Mexico, because it is trying to hold on to as much of its declining empire as it can. And it will sacrifice its friends before it turns in on itself. But please notice the word before. Now to the election on Sunday as a moment in this process. The leading political forces in Germany, like in the United States, which they copied, were two major parties. The German equivalent of the Republicans and the Democrats, which over there was the CDU-CSU combination, the conservative but not far right-wing, the Republican Party equivalent in Germany, and the Socialist Party, which was the rough equivalent of the Democrats in the United States. The fact that these two parties barely scraped together half of the vote in the election this last Sunday is a measure of how far they have fallen. They're the people who championed subordinating us here in Germany to the United States. They disagreed on the details. One was more eager to work with the Republicans, the other a bit more interested in working with the Democrats. But they, like the Republicans and Democrats, comfortably exchanged the domination every few years in an election that first put one of them and then the other one in the dominant position. Together, they got 3/4 or more of the vote. They can't do that anymore because more and more Germans, step by step, are withdrawing their support for that kind of middle-of-the-road, continue the way it's been, establishment politics. Just like Mr. Trump could brush aside the old Republican leadership and then brush aside the centrist Democratic leadership here, you are seeing comparable things there. But it's different because Germany has a strong leftist community that is organized. And there's the key difference. The United States has an equally strong leftist community, but it is unspeakably disorganized. So in Germany, for example, in this last election, we had two leftist parties. One of them is called Die Linke. You pronounce that E at the end. That's how the German language works. Die Linke means the left. The word left in Germany is Linke. So to make sure everybody understands where they stand politically, they call themselves the left party, in effect, Die Linke. They had a split a little while ago, and one of their most successful leaders, a woman named Sarah Wagenknecht, broke away and formed her own party, which has initials BSW. S and W, her initials. The combination, the collection, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. If you put their two votes together, they got just shy of 14% of the vote. 1 in 7 Germans who voted last Sunday voted for parties with deep roots in socialism, communism, Marxism, and all the rest. It is an upsurge of support for the left. If you read American newspapers, all you would hear about was the growth in the power of the right. The right, a group called Alternative, the German word for the English alternative, Alternative für Deutschland, alternative for Germany. That right-wing political party got about 20% of the vote. So 1 in 5 Germans voted for the right, 1 in 7 Germans voted for the far left, leaving the middle collapsed. The conservatives, the liberals, the Green Party, which is the most right-wing Green Party in all of Europe, is in Germany. Those 3 parties, which dominated before, are now shrinking. The only part of it not shrinking is the far right. There we have it. The middle is disappearing. And ironically or not, the far left and the far right are the ones most unlikely to support any further participation by Germany in the Ukraine war. So it's not just Mr. Trump withdrawing from support of Zelensky et al. In Ukraine. It is now the most important country in Germany doing the same. Now, you will see the government that was just elected, the remnants of the old establishment held on enough to be the new government. But they know, just as I'm explaining, that their days are numbered and their support weaker than it has ever been. Why is that important? My last point. Because they are under pressure now that the United States says, we're keeping our money for ourselves. We're having a hard enough time holding on to what we got. We're not going to help you in any way. We don't care what the results are. We are not going to protect you anymore. We can't afford it. We can't. We used to need you as allies. We probably still do, but we can't afford it, so you're dispensable. We need Canada and Mexico, but we can't afford it, so we're going to savage them economically, apparently. But what does that mean for Europe? They are already the third wheel in a two-wheeled contest. in the global economy between the United States and its allies on the one hand, and the allies are dropping away, and the Chinese and their allies on the other side. But unlike in the West, the allies of the Chinese, the BRICS, are growing and expanding in number, whereas those in the West are shrinking. No one should mistake that dramatic difference. But the Europeans are the odd man out. No great technical breakthroughs coming from Europe. Europe is big, Europe is rich, but it can't find a way to unify effectively to be a real competitor for either the United States or the Chinese. And as long as that remains the case, their situation is dire and getting worse. They've all decided, apparently, that having bet on the United States, all of these center establishment politicians, like Mr. Merz, the one who will take over in Germany, or like Mr. Macron in France, or like Mr. Starmer in England. All of these leaders' careers have been sucking up to the United States. So they're going to continue. And their great breakthrough, they're going to spend more money on defense now that the United States isn't going to provide that for them anymore. But how in the world, if they're not doing very well economically, and they're not, how are they going to pay for an enormous increase in military expenditure? Well, there are two bets. Number one, they won't even try. Number two, they will try, and the only way they can get the money to do it is to cut back on social programs. You know, they're going to have a equivalent of Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk. They're going to fire the millions of people who work for the governments in those countries, providing what? Social services far more generous than what the United States government ever did for its people. Let me remind you, in Europe, it's common. The law requires an employer to give the employees 3 to 5 weeks of paid vacation every year from the minute they start work. We have nothing remotely like that in the United States. They have a national health service that covers you from birth till death. We have nothing like that in the United States. They provide free higher education in most of their universities. We have nothing like that in the United States. I could go on. They're going to cut all that back. And you know what that's going to mean? A level of social trouble in Europe, the likes of which we have probably never seen since the transition from feudalism to capitalism highlighted by the French Revolution. Why? Because the far right, Alternative für Deutschland, and the far left, Die Linke and Sarah Wagenknecht, are the people who are ready and already organized to take the working class into opposition against savaging their welfare to chase the absurd dream of military equivalence with the overdeveloped American military and the mass of people that are in India and China against which the Europeans could never prevail in any case. We are watching fundamental shifts in the relative power of the global North, that's the US and Europe, and the global South, that's China, India, and all of them. No one should be under any illusion that what we're going through is less than that historic shift.